Hey guys, welcome to Quinian's Budget Crafts. So it's challenge time again over on the TCU Discord, and this time they want us to build something that I can actually use. It is a display board. So now, normally people would use a picture frame for making these, and I kind of totally forgot to buy one. So I'll just go ahead and make something to put it on. I just took a piece of hardboard and put down a clipboard on the back of it so that when I put the cork on top of that clipboard, it'll be the same height as those roads I made. That way I can just cheat and stick the road in there and be done with that section. Figured out about what size I want for the building in the background and cut that out of some ready board. And that thing back there I've been using as a paintbrush holder this entire time, that's actually one of my rollers. This is the clean bricks one. So just roll out some bricks and be done with that real fast. Then I just used one of the little cars that I did to figure out about how high I want the windows. This is going to be like a gas station. Just draw those out, and then you can cut that section out with an X-Acto knife or whatever. For the roof on this building, I wanted it to have a little bit of overhang all the way around, so I cut that just a bit bigger than the building, and then just sort of hot glue it all together. There we go, that's not too bad. It does need a little bit of a base though. I mean, most buildings are elevated just slightly, so I cut out another piece about the same size as the roof and then hot glue that down. Then I went around the edge of it with the Sharpie to put in some like the curb that would be around the building. And then I took my little rotary tool and ground down where the entrance is, so it's not a step, it's just like a ramp. And glue the whole thing down. Then I cut out a few more pieces and used those to make a border around the top of the roof. That way you can put signs or whatever you want on that. And then I made another thing of bricks to make like a little box to put the sign that I 3D printed on top of the building. This section off to the left over here, I was going to use that 3D printed barricade, but it's actually too small, so you can just ignore that. But I did need some chain link fence. So I'm using some of the dollar store business card holder. And I discovered that if you just grab the edge of that thing, you can pull it and it'll pull right off. To make this look more like a chain link fence, I used some round dowels and a little bit of wire to attach it to the edges. The method seems okay, but it does need some work. I'll play with that later, but for right now this actually seems to be alright. And then after looking at the building for a little bit, I realized it looks strange because most of the gas stations where I am have these really huge bricks in the corner. So just grab some bricks from my box of random bricks, stack them on there, and glue them. You've seen me do that a bunch of times. Once you're happy with the foam work you've got done, you can just go ahead and seal all that up with some black paint and Mod Podge. And you can glue the fence in now if you want to. I probably should have waited, but it turned out fine, so whatever. As for the paint on this, I just went over it with like a light gray. Then I decided it needed some actual color. Again, copying gas stations where I live, I did the corners and the bottom third or whatever in like a light blue. And I did the thing around the top in a tan. For the windows here, I just took some of that mirror tape and put it on some foam and glued it in behind the window. That way you've got the reflective glass thing going on. I wanted to put some security bars over the windows, and I recently disassembled an oscillating fan. It's got all these little metal pieces to it. Problem is, bending those things without the proper pliers to make the little U-shape is nearly impossible. So I did bend a bunch into little hooks and stuff, and then messed around trying to get them to weave over each other or whatever. It really didn't work out. At least not what I had originally planned. After messing with that for entirely too long, I decided I could just use the vertical bars, and then I'll put some more of that mesh behind them, and then it'll work like security bars, sort of good enough. Also, the more I looked at this building, the more I actually kind of didn't really like the blue, so I went over it with some Agrax Earthshade to try to sort of make everything dirty. Like maybe it was blue at one time, but it hasn't been that way in a long time. For the sign on top of the roof, I modified a billboard that I found on Thingiverse. I put the rocket on there. And I made a little printout that says ice cold beer sold here. You like the old kind of, like the vintage gas stations. Just glue that on there with some 50/50 water and Mod Podge. Then I went through and painted everything. Made the rocket red. There's one Easter egg for you. I tried to cross out the ice cold section, like as if somebody had climbed up there with a bucket of paint. Didn't really work out, but it's fine. It looks alright. Then I went through and painted the little light housings on there. They really don't need to be perfect. For what I'm using this for, you're not really going to see that. Now we gotta put some advertisements in the window. So New Coca-Cola and Mentats will work pretty good. Can't really tell what that is back there, but that's kind of the point. Since the barricade that I printed was too small to put how I had in my head originally, I decided what I'd do instead is put a car back there behind that fence and try to make it look pretty close to the car that's in all the Gaslands books. It's like some kind of muscle car with a tarp over it. For the tarp, that is literally just a paper towel that I soaked in some watered down paint, and then I glue it on with the 50/50 water and Mod Podge. And then I went through with some black wash and kind of dirtied up pretty much everything. For the door, I did the same thing as the windows. I just cut out a piece of foam and stuck some mirror tape on there, put a couple bars, and called it a day. Probably should have put a border around it, that would have made more sense, but this still works. So then after looking at this for a minute, I realized that if I put a car on the road and try to take a picture of it, you're going to see a whole bunch of stuff in the background that's not the gas station, so it needs some kind of backing to block the entire back section of it. Well, I'm always looking to recycle my old terrain that I never really use, and I have this factory here. I was like, this would probably be a really good use for something like this. Having a giant garage next to the gas station might actually kind of make sense, especially with the broken car sitting there. So I just went ahead and cut off the big section here that's got the bay door on it. Figured out the appropriate size and marked it, and then cut it down to fit. I also had to trim away a little bit of the gas station to get it to fit exactly where I wanted. I'm limited to a certain size here, so I couldn't have anything hanging off. Then once I put that up there, I realized that looks a little out of place, just sort of hanging out there by itself. So what if I were to put the rest of the building behind it too? That the gas station is coming off a larger building. So I took another wall and I trimmed that down to fit on top of the roof of the gas station. Had to piece it together a little bit. There's a small seam there, but it's okay. Then trim the rest of the stuff on top of the gas station to fit, and I can glue that brick wall up there. Still needed to come all the way out to the other edge so it didn't look incomplete. So I trimmed off another section there with the crisscross bricks on the corner and used that to finish the edge of it. With all the cutting and stuff, I now have exposed white foam. Again, you're probably not going to see it, but just for my own sanity, I went ahead and painted all that black. That's a whole lot better, but there is a huge gap. So to hide the gap, I went ahead and put down some glue and some of this dirt and sand and grout powder. Then kind of made it really wet with the watered down glue and mushed it up against the corner, so it looks like the dirt is like blown against the wall. And now we need some gas pumps. I went ahead and put down that little thing for the gas pumps to sit on. I didn't show that, but I mean it's just an oval rectangle thing. The gas pumps themselves are little tombstones of XPS foam. They are too big though, so I went ahead and trimmed them down on the hot wire. You could do it with a knife, but the hot wire is easier. And then just use this little pack of assorted sandpaper I got from the dollar store to clean them up. Of course, with XPS, be careful, the dust is real bad for you, definitely wear a mask. All the vintage gas pumps that I was looking up all had like a sort of like a tombstone shape, sort of like housing, and they have a circle above it that say gas, or sometimes it'll have like the company logo or something. These little circles here are just compressed cardboard that are waxed. Use my little rotary tool to file the edge to make it kind of domed looking. And then I made a yellow square with a red circle and the word gas in the middle of it. This is super simple, and it'll work just fine for this. Went ahead and sealed all that up with some black paint and Mod Podge. Not really necessary on the circles, but I did want the edge of them to be black, so might as well. Go ahead and cut out your decals and stick them on there. I used water glue, but that's probably not the best choice because it does make the ink run a little bit. And you can paint the pumps themselves whatever color you wanted. Figured since the circle is yellow, might as well do the pumps in yellow. Stab a hole, and then you can stab the pumps right into them. And I realized after I had painted them that most of these have like a little recess that has the counter for how much gas you pumped. That's fine, I can go ahead and cut out the square now and paint it, it'll be fine. For the actual gas pump thing, hose, whatever, I used some electrical wire. When I split the black from the red, it left like a red stripe, so I just painted that black. Then I made that thing that I cut out nice and flat with the hot tip of the glue gun. And just a big giant yellow tombstone looks really strange, it needs something on it. So I printed out a couple of the Rutherford, I think they're like actually billboard pasties, but they're from the Osprey Games website. They have these things you can print out. In the lore of the game, Rutherford seemed to make the most sense to own a gas station, so I'll use those. Same idea, just cut them out and stick them on. Now paint the inside of the little hole stark white, or you could use the decal there if you wanted to. And I also did want something on that face, the front overhang thing. So I used the Mars billboard that you can print out. I had to trim it a little bit smaller than it prints out so that I could actually make it fit in that space, but it worked out. For the gas pump thing itself, you don't actually need the handle section. It's a level of detail that is really unnecessary for what I'm doing. So I just stuck the wire straight into the side of the foam and glued it in place with some super glue. And then hot glue the thing down to the little platform that they sit on. In hindsight, I probably should have put the numbers and stuff in there before I glued them down, but it's okay. Like I said, you're not really going to see that, so as long as it's got something convincing, just some squiggles is fine. And now it's time to go through and put in some oil stains and whatnot. Started out with some Nolan oil. Decided that was too flat, it didn't really work, so I took a bunch of color shift and then watered it down and put it on top of the oil stains, so it's got that like iridescent sheen. And then went back over with more Nolan oil and just dripped it on there to make it blacker but still shiny. I did all this while all the stuff was still wet. And now we can take some hairspray and some grout powder and just make everything dirty. Just shaking it on with a sifter. And I didn't like the gaps in between the little platform things I put down and the basing, so I put some white glue down and then put some sand and whatnot, that mix I have in that jar. And then I used a very heavily watered down brush to kind of mush everything around, get rid of any solid dots from the grout powder, just kind of blend everything together. Once all that's nice and dry, now we can test it out. Put a couple of cars on there. Take some really horrible pictures with the cell phone. You do still have the windows and stuff on the side of the gas station if you wanted to use this for terrain. You totally could do that. You just put other pieces of the building up there. Add a couple of road sections, whatever. And aside from using it to just take pictures of your cars with, you could actually use this as a piece of terrain, or I don't know, make it a pit stop, have some kind of house rule where you can only go around the track once or twice before you gotta stop for gas, or I don't know, make up your own rules. But there you go, guys, there's a little take a picture of your stuff diorama thing. I have no idea what they're actually called. Broadsword Wargaming actually recently made one of these, which I think is where Ryan got the idea from. But anyway, this is pretty cool because I can actually use this. And it gave me a chance to recycle some old terrain that I had literally never once used. Of course, as always, thanks for watching, everyone. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.